We're live now, Chair.
Thank you very much, Debbie. We've called this special meeting to discuss the issues that we're having with bin collections in particular, but also street cleansing as well. I think all of us here, all the councillors here, have had a mailbox full of complaints about bins not being emptied properly and street cleansing not being taken care of properly. And we're getting it in the neck. And it's a daily occurrence with several emails about missed bin collections or the streets are dirty. So we really want to talk to you and get some explanations as to why this is happening and get to some solutions. We're not here just to listen to excuses. We want to see things happen and we want some solutions. So starting off, can I have apologies, please, Debbie?
You can, Councillor Carter. It is agenda item 1. We have apologies from Councillors Simon Seery, Peter Carlill and Andrew Carter. I understand that some of them may actually join a bit later after another meeting that they're attending.
Thank you.
Could I go on to agenda? I'm going to say, could I go on to agenda item 2?
Yes, please do.
Could I ask members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests? I'll take silence as there being none. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we're going on to the main body of the meeting now. And Mr. Rogers, are you going to be speaking first?
I can do, Chair, if that would be helpful, just to maybe set the scene in the context. Morning, everybody, and thank you for the invite this morning. Let me first say that I do understand very much that there are clearly a number of issues and challenges that we're seeking to deal with some of our key operational services, and particularly in this respect in terms of refuse collection and street cleansing. And just to say sort of up front that we're really keen to work with you to understand, well, we know many of the issues, but to understand the key issues that you want to focus upon and like you just said, Chair, try and develop and find solutions looking forward that work and are sustainable. I mean, just to set the scene, I think it's fair to say that even forgetting COVID, before COVID even arrived, we've got an issue where within Leeds we are working with routes which were designed many years ago, and the city has changed quite significantly since they were designed back in, I think it was about 2009-10, the last time the routes are fundamentally reviewed. And one of the things we've been keen to do actually for the last couple of years is to do a significant review of all routes to make sure that we've got the right routes in place which are as effective and as efficient as they can be across the city. That sort of route review work is highly dependent upon having a new depot, which is something that we've been seeking to take forward. And as many of you will be aware, we got approval to a new depot towards the end of last year by Executive Board. So that new depot is now in the process of being built. We expect that depot to become operational in sort of early 2022, and that gives us the sort of key focus then for completing that route review, which will help deal with some of the sort of underlying issues that we've got within the city. The other major issue that we've been dealing with again before the pandemic is to do with access to particular streets, where we find that there are a number of streets within the city where access for a refuse vehicle becomes problematic because of parked cars or wherever it might be. And as you know, we've been progressing what's called a citywide traffic restriction order, or traffic regulation order rather, to implement that across the city. And again, that got delayed due to COVID, but most of those schemes are now being implemented by our highways colleagues, and that will start to have a positive impact upon those areas where regularly we will be reporting issues around vehicle obstructions in terms of fetching routes. All of that clearly has been impacted by COVID, but COVID then, I have to say, has been a massive challenge, again, for all of us, but particularly in terms of the operational services which have had to continue during COVID, working within all the restrictions that we've got. So restrictions of how many people we can have in a cab, how we manage that safely, how do we deal with people who get COVID symptoms and the crews that they've been with and then have to stand down crews. And all of that, I have to say, has been a massive challenge operationally in terms of how we manage that on a day-to-day basis. And if I'm honest, I am really pleased in the way that the waste management team have been able to respond to the pressures of the pandemic and in the main keep the service running, and the majority of people get their refuse collected in the time it is due to be collected. We need to see that in the context of we collect every day on average between 67,000 and 87,000 bins every day across the city, which is a massive undertaking. We're one of the biggest refuse collection services within the country. It varies between 67,000 and 87,000 depending upon whether we've got the garden refuse service in place at what particular time of year, but clearly now is the busiest time of year in terms of sort of having the highest amount of waste that we're collecting. Coupled with that, what we've also seen since the pandemic started, because more people are spending more time at home, is a significant increase in the amount of waste that we're collecting. And we're still seeing that today, somewhere in the region of 15% excess waste that we're seeing within the city, that the routes haven't been designed to collect. So we're working clearly in terms of trying to do what we would normally do, plus 15% extra, which if you can imagine on sort of 8,000 to 7,000 bins, it's a significant addition to the normal workload that we would need to have. And again, I think in the main, the team have responded really well to that particular challenge. And I think looking forward, in the minute, we don't see that excess waste reducing significantly. So that's going to be a continuing challenge for us looking forward. And then the other issue I would just mention is that we're now sort of 15, 16 months into dealing with sort of these services within the pandemic. And I have to say that our staff have significantly gone above and beyond in terms of their contribution over that period in time. And many of them now are wanting to obviously catch up on leave that they couldn't take last year because we were making sure we kept the service out. And again, that is creating, as of today, ongoing problems for us, and particularly as the weather warms up and we get into the holiday period where we've then got to manage that in terms of the sort of operational delivery of the day-to-day task. Now, I'm not using any of that as an excuse. I'm just trying to sort of set the perspective for members in terms of the challenges that we're having to manage on a day-to-day basis. And what I would add, because I've concentrated most of that, I think, on refuse, which is probably, I think, the main concern. In terms of street cleansing activity, one of our key main challenge in terms of street cleansing has been the number of staff who, during the pandemic, were impacted by what's called the clinically extremely vulnerable category of individuals. And I think it was a service with the highest number of people who fell into that particular category, and therefore for a large part of the pandemic were instructed to stay at home and not be at work. And we lost somewhere in the region, and Jason will be able to give you the specifics, 30 to 40% of our workforce during a big course of last year in terms of street cleansing activity. And we're still managing with that. Now, a lot of them are back now, but we're managing with that and managing with the catch-up. I'll pause there because I don't know whether, Councillor Carter, you want to allow John and Jason to add to that, but I just wanted to set the scene. But go back to what I said at the beginning. We are really keen to have a good, positive dialogue with members, understanding the issues and challenges that you're facing with constituents and the issues that they're raising with you, and for us to work together to find solutions in terms of how we deal with the issues looking forward. That's it from me, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I think it would be helpful now if we ask members to ask their questions now, and then officers can come in as and when to reply. So I see one hand up already. David?
Thanks, Chair. I think I'll put it in two separate bits. I mean, there is the basic fact of the bin collections. I mean, what is the annoying part about it is I am getting, and I have got this morning already 3 emails about mis bin collections, and they all seem to be similar places where you're getting similar complaints on similar routes, and then what we'll get is, and this happened to 2 collections on trot on Blue Hill Lane in my ward. The vehicle goes into Cliff Parks, which you've got to go down Blue Hill Lane to get to, empties Cliff Parks, then goes sailing past the houses that it hasn't emptied previously, and it should have done them first. And the fact is, then you look at list and Blue Hill Lane's not mentioned. Now, some years ago, when I was in administration, my portfolio covered customer services. And I got the call centre to do a survey of what we got reported as miscollections, and taking off the odd, the odd one in the street, which would more than likely somebody hadn't put the bin out or something like that. What we tried to do, to be fair, was we got what we thought had been missed, and what we thought had been missed was twice as many as what the department was reporting. And I remember Councillor Smith, who was then the executive member for environment, and I having a meeting with officers and trying to get to the bottom of this. But it's quite clear to me that what's happening now is a load of miscollections, or I won't say miscollections, because miscollection, you've got to allow for recovery, but a load of collections that aren't being done on day are not being reported by staff, and they're being reported by general public. And because we're in the situation we are now, instead of it going to call centre, what it's doing, it's coming to us, and we're getting it in neck. We're the people that they're contacting, and day after day after day, you're getting this. Also, where we've reported them, if it's reported into our offices, it goes on to this member's refuse. Well, I don't use myself. If it comes to me and I deal with it, I don't use members' refuse. I ring up Sue Yeomans at Cross Green, and or email her mail her, because I get some sense then. Because if somebody's had the bin not collected, they want to know quickly what's going to happen. They don't want to wait till 5 days after recovery's been done, as happened last week. We won that were done through office, to be told that the bin was collected on last Friday. Well, they already know that. What they want to know is that somebody's doing something about it. And the problem is members get it in neck for that. The other issue I think we have, and this is beginning to come on to street cleaning. I have a number of areas, bottom of my street in Blackpool, in front at Weston's on Lower Wortley Road, where we have some people that put out side waste that gets left, and gets left there for days. And it tends to be that I have to go and report it, or one of my colleagues have to go and report it before it gets shifted. Right, well, we don't want people to put outside waste, but we want something doing about it. Leaving it there is not good enough. We want it stopping. And then another issue around that is with Lee Haywood and I have been dealing with a case of where we're getting dumping on this private garage area in Colmores and Highfields. Well, what we've done in our infinite wisdom is decided to do these flats with the communal bins on garage area. Well, what's happening is the garage area is becoming a tip. The land's private, so we shouldn't be clearing it, we should be enforcing. And what we've done is, and Lee's done this a number of times and copied me in, we've written to bin people saying, look, we don't see any reason why they shouldn't have individual bins in their gardens, because that will resolve that problem, because that's what the problem is. Somebody does there, it's overflowing, somebody puts some aside, somebody else comes and dumps there. And as I say, it's not adopted land, it's not council land, it's privately owned land, so we shouldn't be doing that really. And then I think the other issue is, well, first of all, can I thank Jason and them for what they're suggesting about bringing back together the Outer West street cleaning team, because I think that's been a problem, because we've been done from outer south, and the rest of Outer West being done from elsewhere, and bringing it under the same management actually means that we're getting a consistent service across the board. I know when we went into lockdown last year, and I'm not saying which way were right way, but the bins in my ward were left open, and notice we put on not to use them, and then the ones across the border in Armley and Pudsey had bags put over the top of them, so you can't use them. And I'm not saying which is the right way, but I know people where the bags were put over were complaining ours was still open, and our people were complaining that ours were overflowing. So at least we should get some consistency there, and I welcome that. But the other thing is on street cleaning. I think what we need is, which we had when we first set up the environmental subgroups in the old area committees, was we used to have a service level agreement, and that seems to have gone out of the window. Because the fact is, as an area, as a community committee, we have supported cleansing with new bins and various other things over time. But quite honestly, now trying to decide what is extra, or are we paying for something that centre should be paying? You can't distinguish between. So we need a proper service level agreement. We ought to know what we're entitled to and what we have to pay for extra. I think going back to how it was previously might help us do that, but clearly that's a problem, I think, because we just don't know. What happens is one member gets told one thing, have you got some money? Every time you want a bin replacing, oh, we haven't got no bins, you'll have to buy some. And old Pudsy's bought some, we've bought some. I think Farsley and Carvely's bought some. But the thing is, should we be doing that? Should it not come out of centre? So, I know, I'll keep quiet now and let somebody else go.
All right, thank you. There are two sort of main issues there. One is the cleansing and the other one is the bins. So could I ask the officer to talk about bins first and then to talk about strict cleansing next? And I've got Anne Forsyth and Anne Blackburn and Simon Seary to speak.
Did you want me to come in first before the officers answer?
I think it might be helpful if the officers answer first, and then if that question's been answered, you no need to ask it.
It's quite a specific question that they might want to address. I don't need to go on. My question is simply, is account taken when you are, in terms of the days and times of the routes, as to which are wound schools? Because there's been a case, well, yes, recently when there was a problem with collecting because of access, because they tried to collect during school drop-off or pick-up time. Thank you. That was my question, quite specific.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, so would the officers like to answer those questions, please?
I can take the refuse-related ones, Councillor Cart, if that's okay.
Thank you.
There's two or three sort of different issues I think Councillor Blackburn's raised, which aren't dissimilar to some of the things that James covered, but I think one of the main things that Councillor Blackburn was expressing was the frustration in the number of missed streets that aren't being reported on the end of the day. As Councillor Blackburn highlighted himself, the problem has been here for years, back in the times when he was involved. It's always been an issue and something that we've tried to sort out throughout the last few years to improve the end of day report, to get the quality of the information you get better, so make it more relevant, appropriate, so you aren't bombarded with information that's not relevant, but also crucially that it's showing the right streets. And as you're aware, we did quite a lot of work on that pre-pandemic around trying to get the information better. So a lot of this was raised through scrutiny. So we looked at the in-cab technology, getting the in-cab technology more used. We're probably down at 30% of trucks, wagons, a couple of years ago, probably using the in-cab technology. We brought in a new charge hand roll into the service, did a lot of training around the use of the in-cab technology and got that up to around 80-90%, which isn't our target. Our target, of course, is 100%, but we were moving significantly in the right direction, and that helped improve the end-of-day reporting reliability considerably. And that was something I think the members were recognising, certainly pre-pandemic. But the challenges we've got at the moment do increase the likelihood that crews don't report a missed bin, which again something we do take up individually with crews, and we try to work with them on the reasons for that, whether it be a training issue or even stronger. But to be fair on the crews, some practicalities at the moment make it really difficult for all the missed streets to be properly recorded and then brought back to cross screen and then double checked with what's on the in-cab technology in time for the end of day report to go out to members, usually about 5 each day. It's quite a significant logistical exercise with the quantity of bins that James has highlighted to do. So some of the issues that that have caused us problems have been where we've had to stand down a crew midday or first thing, send sometimes further scratch screw back up throughout quickly, or maybe during the day we finish a route and understand where the point they've finished at, where they need to pick up. Often they're also going out in a hire vehicle because we have to stand the vehicle down and get it de-cleansed. And we have an issue with the hire vehicles at the moment that they don't have the in-cab technology in them. So in terms of trying to look at these issues, and because that's what obviously as council, I'm sure you want to hear from me, that we recognise issues and we try to do something about it. So I need to be honest and say that there will continue to be some issues whilst the pandemic continues, and we're working very much each morning on just trying our best to get as many crews out as possible, as many backups out as possible, and there are issues to do with fleet, etc. So that will always be an issue, I'm afraid, while the pandemic is in place. But I recognise the fact that there are things that we can do to improve that. So like I say, we highlight, and I certainly highlight with the crews around the importance of missed bins and why that's so important. We are looking as well at the moment around working with a company that provides the in-cab technology Bartech to look at whether we can have some sort of portable devices that can be moved more easily out of existing wagons into temporary hire vehicles. There could be a significant cost involved in that, but we're looking at meeting that cost anyway. That won't necessarily give us all the information that the current in-cabs give us, but as long as we can at least track the vehicles and understand whether they've been to certain streets or not, that would be helpful. So we are trying to do things around that, but I need to be honest to say that's it's always going to be a challenge to us, and I can understand the frustration that causes members. I think the biggest thing I would sort of say on that really is it emphasises the need for good communications and a consistency of communications. That's something we've tried to do, and I accept the fact that not always we've managed it, but I think we've tried every day through the end of the day report and where we know there are issues to communicate with members around that. So that you're empowered to communicate with residents. But I still think that overlying message to residents has to be that we're still in a difficult times. The tonnages that James has described are huge still, 15-20% more than normal. They've not gone down to smaller amounts, as some people seem to think. They are still significant. And we have this, at the moment, for example, we're certainly in the effects of a third wave. There's absolutely no doubt about that in terms of how that affects the service. We have 3 people as of today off with positive tests from this week. We have a number extra that are self-isolating. We have a number of crew bubbles stood down. And as I say, the tonnages are up. So we are certainly getting there in terms of how it was affecting us in the second wave, in terms of how it affects us now operationally. So I think that message really needs to still be there for residents. We've been clear in that, consistent, I think, in that messaging around the fact that there will be some streets missed, some bins missed. We will all try our absolute best to meet the service commitment of within 48 hours of the missed collection date. We'll try and get back and collect the bins, but that may not be possible in all circumstances. And again, that message kind of needs to be given to residents. I would argue that in the majority of misses that we have that have been there, we have collected in the 48 hours. So I think it's rare that we don't. And given I actually thought when we were doing the emergency planning at the start of the pandemic, and certainly as the first and second wave hit us, I thought we would be hitting a situation where we'd be having to stand down routes more than we have, suspending the brown bin more than we have, potentially missing some green bins. So I think by and large we've done pretty well with that. I think the frustration, again, the other point that Councillor Blackburn raised, which I appreciate and recognise, is where the members' refuse email address, again, I think that works by and large, but there are occasions when referrals are coming through there, through the contact centre and through the members' refuse and through our complaints team, where they're not being responded to within the 48 hours. And of course, that then gives problems to yourselves. And I recognise that issue then, that you get more contact from constituents because they've done the right thing and gone through the process and not heard back, so they're not understanding what they're supposed to do. That's something we're working on at the moment to try and improve further. Is a resourcing issue and a prioritisation issue within that team. And that's something that we're working on now to try and improve even better than it is. So hopefully you should see some improvements in that over the next few days and couple of weeks. I think that's the main refuse issues that Councillor Blackburn raised, direct refuse issues. I know there was a specific example given around communal bins as opposed to single bins that he's working with Lee Haywood on. So I'll make contact with Lee around that to try and understand a little bit better what that specific issue is and what Lee and Councillor Blackburn's, it seems like, solution is to that would help. I think the other things I think Jason, Chris, if you're on the line, I think are more for you. I think around the SLA and specifically who pays for new litter bins. So perhaps let Jason respond to that. All I'd just say is that what I am looking at, linked to the route review and the wider review of waste management, really, is looking at refreshing that SLA and coming back to community committees with something that not only looks again at what the relationship with community committees is with Clean Neighbours team, but also what it is with refuse and recycling in particular. So we actually want to come back to community committees to enhance the SLA in a lot of ways, to look at it broadening out, to bring those two bits of the service together under one environmental services SLA, or certainly a greater understanding of how you can be more influential and work with us, particularly around recycling rates. That does depend a lot on the route review, because part of the route review is about us looking at how routes are designed and managed, and what we said we want to do, and it's one of the specific outcomes in the route review, is to create routes that are coterminous with community committees. That's something that's one of the sort of the great asks, if you like, of the refuse service, certainly over the last few years when I was working more on Clean Neighbours side of things, is how can we get refuse and Clean Neighbours to be more coterminous and be more, as near as we can, coterminous with community committees, so that there's a greater accountability and relationship with yourselves from a refuse and particularly recycling perspective. So I'll leave it there, because Jason may want to just add a couple of things specifically about that, but I hope that gives some reassurance.
Jason, do you want to comment, please?
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Just to really reiterate and echo the points that James and John have made. So there's an absolute commitment on our part to sort of ensure accountability to elected members. We're directly delegated, as you know, we have the delegated functions. And whilst It's true that we no longer have a written SLA. I think it is time to refresh our collective understanding of what you can expect and what we can realistically provide with the finite resource that we have. James outlined some general points around staffing numbers over the last 12 to 18 months. I'm not going to repeat those, but it's fair to say it has been a struggle in terms of maintaining levels of service that we were delivering pre-pandemic. One of the areas that was hit particularly hard by our need to prioritise service in certain types of waste and public health related litter and waste removal was the mechanical sweeping and the manual litter picking. Now that staffing levels are normalised, we are in the process of redrawing those sweeping schedules, making sure that we're able to maintain our commitment to regular street sweeping, whether it's path or whether it's gully and road sweeping. I know Chris is on with that piece of work and will work closely with you during the handover to Sharon, who will be the new team leader. So I acknowledge that that's an area where we've not done as well as we have done in the past. There's been a number of complex reasons for that, whether it's around staffing levels, whether it's around changes of supervision, which you've also been subjected to. I know that you lost Baz as a team leader. We had to move him elsewhere, and we're still in the process of transitioning to new team leaders. So that's not been easy for you, and I do appreciate that that would have had an added impact and created added frustrations. So we're in the process of redrawing those schedules, realigning staff, and sort of refreshing that understanding of what's required locally. Sharon will be meeting with you all regularly as the team leader to look at TNT related issues, as well as some of the issues that you've highlighted in terms of waste and bins. And we'll go on working with you to ensure that we remain accountable.
Thank you, Jason. From our point of view, sorry, go on.
Just to come back on the point about litter bins. It is a bit of a mixed approach, and it has to be, because we have a finite budget in terms of service budgets in relation to litter bins, and we always welcome and encourage community committees or members through their own funding to sort of add value where they feel that they can. But I do want us to sort of be clearer. I think that's what the call is, in terms of what you can expect from us as a service. We're in the process of finalising a new capital programme for litter bins that the service will provide. And coincidentally, we're also in the process of appointing a new litter bin supplier. So it is a good time to make clearer, I think, what you can expect from the service and under what circumstances you can expect the service to replace and add new bins, and where we have to work with you to sort of top that up. And once again, happy to have that discussion, but it will needs to continue to be a mixed approach between service commitments and local funding from Wellbeing or MICE.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Before I ask David if he wants to come back in, could I ask John to come in? He's got his hand up. John Woolmer.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just to add a response to Councillor, was it Forsyth? Sorry, I can't remember which councillor it was that raised the issue around the schools. Yeah, the answer to that is, of course, where we can, if we can look at the route and have a discussion with the crew to look at how they work the route, and if they can work it another way around, to take into account to miss a primary school at the time when it's starting in the morning, if that's causing access issues. Yes, we will definitely have those local discussions with the crews. So if we can do it, yes, we would do it. I think the issue at the moment, of course, is it's not always the regular crews. Maybe backup crew coming in, maybe a scratch crew. So they may just start the route from where they'd expect to start when they look at the mapping. So sometimes that might not work. But yes, we certainly would have those discussions. And again, that's another issue when we do the route review. It's an opportunity to involve and consult with members, in particular, as we did with the garden routes, around any specific localised issues that keep coming up as issues for you. You think a new route needs to be designed around, so that will be the sort of longer term aspirations. So yes, I'm quite happy to look at that specific issue with Councillor Forsyth if that's still an issue. Just on that though, it's probably just worth quickly saying that I know James alluded to it, but one of the big issues remains around hard to access routes. So a number of fails are related to whether that's cars parked so we can't get up the street, or if we just had a smaller vehicle we could get up there. So we have been doing a lot of work in terms of trying to get some yellow lines installed across the city as part of a traffic regulation order, and Highways have almost completed the first phase of that now. So there will be an opportunity to members to consult again through a second phase if there are any particular locations that you do feel some yellow lines on the corner of the street to help the wagons swing in would really help. But the other good news is, although we, and I keep referring to it, but it's a fact, the route review is suspended as such, so we're trying to resurrect that soon. We are going to look at a temporary extra hard to access route for the city whilst we undertake the route review, acknowledging the fact that that's going to take months to complete. So the good news is that should start next month in July. And I know that there are a number of locations included, and there's new routes in the Outer West area. So I've asked for that to be mapped up and sent over to yourselves, so you can see the extra hard to access streets that will be included with a smaller vehicle from next month. And that should deal with some of the ongoing historic sort of location specific misses that you get frustrated about, and we get frustrated about too. So I hope that helps.
Right, and I'm going to change of plan here. David, I'm going to ask you if you want to come back and say anything, and after that I'm going to ask all members to come in with their questions and then let the officers answer at the end. David, do you want to come back on that?
Just a quick, because I think I've set up enough time, but just on what John just said there about the route rationalisation, it just came to my mind there. I mean, one of the problems we have lots of problems with, and I'm not getting it at anybody here because he's largely parking in streets that aren't capable for taking vehicles, basically, is round the Highfields and in the Linwoods. But probably from this autumn, we'll have an added problem if there's an early kick-off at Ellen Road, because they get collected on a Saturday. And of course, we have parking problems with people going to a football match there. So now all this last season, we haven't had the problem because there's been no crowd there. But now the back at Premiership, if they're getting big crowds and you say it's a dinner time kickoff, it's going to be a disaster there. So are we thinking of doing something with Linwoods and Highfields as part of that route rationalisation and getting it done early?
I'll ask you to take that at the end if you don't mind, Mr. Woolmer. So now I've got Councillor Anne Blackburn, then Simon Seary, then Trish Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I know that John Woolmer has heard me actually say this when we had a scrutiny last week, but I'm mentioning it again because it would be useful to know if other councillors in our area are having the same problem. And that is, it seems, well, I know in some cases, yes, we are having temporary teams due to COVID. But my concern is, I've had this 2 or 3 times with people that have wheel outs, and the wheel outs are not being collected. And as I say, I've said, well, one lady said when she asked, she caught them one week, and asked why they won't take hers, and they tended to think it wasn't their job to do so. Now, I know that the cleansing manager has stated obviously that it is, and that this should be made clear to them, and I understand that it is being made clear to them, but isn't making any difference. So I'm not saying it's always the temporary teams, but it would seem sensible, because normally when our teams do it, they might have the odd blip, but generally it tends to go okay. And it is concerning, you know, because these people obviously have wheel outs for a reason. The lady that got onto me the other day was going on 90, you know, she was saying, well, I can't wheel it out, you know, I've done the right thing and whatever. What's the problem? You know, she was very nice about it. But, you know, these are the vulnerable people that we should be making sure that if they've signed up for a wheel out, that they're getting it. And as I said, I appreciate with COVID and that we get temporary crews in, and, you know, you can always get blips with temporary crews. But I just want to make sure that you know, that they've got the message now, because I'm told they've been given the message, and then lo and behold, about a week later, that the same thing happens again. Sometimes with the same people, sometimes new ones pop up. And so can we reinforce that message, please? And the other thing is, going back to what was said about when people collect, and sometimes when they collect they can't get in because of vehicles. And I know obviously, yes, we're trying to sort that out as far as what John Bulmer said. But where we've had it where they're collecting on Saturday and there's a continuous problem about that, I said, could it be altered? Oh, well, quite a few months ago now. And I was told, well, no, it can't, not till we do the route rationalisation. But I don't see why it can't be. You know, so I think we should be able to look at that, and I will be asking again, because to be honest, it's just costing time and money if a crew's got to go back, because we're talking about whole area of bins, not just the odd one with this. And so, you know, another team goes out, usually maybe on the Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday even, to collect this area of bins. And I'm not saying it happens every week, but it happens a lot, fairly frequently. It's so, you know, I think we're on first name terms now with quite a few people around there, because we know that it's just regular occurrence. So again, I mean, this is the Highfields and the associate streets, roads that we're talking about there. So again, if you can answer those. I mean, the other side is, to be fair, I do think that in the majority of cases that we've done well to keep things going, you know, in the COVID situation. So I would like to flag that up and say I think we've done extremely well. There's always been blips, even before COVID, we've had these problems. But I think we've done well to do what we're doing, to be honest. But if we could sort those things out, that would be good. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ann Blackburn. I've got Councillor Simon Seary now.
Yeah, afternoon. Oh no, morning still. Sorry. I won't go into individual issues because obviously, you know, they get picked up, you know, through email. But I've got about 5 or 6 points. So regarding litter bins, I'm aware that there isn't the contractor for these bins now, so we wanted to order 20 more in the Pudsey ward. Is this new contractor going to have a similar design to the current bin? Is it going to look totally different? You know, a bit frustrating there that, you know, we want to place 20 more bins and we can't do that. On there as well, is there a cleaning regime where they wipe down and remove the COVID stickers? I've read this previously. Regarding the road traffic orders that the Waste Management was doing, they potentially wanted to install one on Pavilion Way in Pudsey, and we challenged it. Why do we need a parking restriction for 24 hours, 7 days a week, just for a Saturday morning bin service? Yeah, can we make it time Pacific or day Pacific? Because You know, you're removing 5-6 parking spaces for 24 hours, 7 days a week, and you don't need that access all that time. Another one was, obviously, John's on about the message about increased bins, increased volume, delays. It's not our job to communicate your message. You're saying you've got issues within your department, you know, you're struggling, but why should we have to accept your failures and communicate that message to our residents? It's not our job, that's your job. Yeah. Another one, quick one with Chris. Fantastic. Yeah, we lost Baz. We gained a fantastic officer, and, you know, thank you for that. And then where were the other one? Timely communication. You know, so we send a missed bin report through to refuse services. We'll get it back in 2 weeks' time saying the bin was collected. Was it collected straight after, or was it collected in the next 2 weeks routine? If we send it to John, get a fantastic response, brilliant. But should I be badgering you 24/7, John, for every missed bin? No, I put a lot through the system. But I feel now I should be putting a lot more through, John, because I get the response that I want. So we need timely communication across the whole department, not just to wait 2 weeks for a missed bin report. So I appreciate there's a lot there, but these are top line things, not individual cases where an empty bin's here and a bin being missed there. These are top line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seary. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. A lot of what I've written down has been covered in a way so far, but I'd like to have some specifics, please. So I've got missed bin report isn't accurate. We know about the narrow streets. We often get overhanging trees. What does that mean? Have they been reported? Have the bins been picked up? Have the bins not going to get picked up? You know, what are we doing about things like that? Assisted collections, I agree with Councillor Anne Blackburn there. The times I get an assisted collection that hasn't been picked up again and again and again, and we get a response eventually saying it's on for the next 4 collections. What happens on the 5th collection? Are we back in that rota again, where, you know, we're badgering the service once again to pick up something that should be an ongoing situation? I agree, side waste is never picked up. We know we don't like side waste. We know it shouldn't be there. However, if a bin is missed, what does the resident do with their accumulative waste? It becomes side waste. Street cleansing is poor quality at the moment. Appreciate the lack of staff. However, in Pudsey Ward particularly, I know how many more bins we've funded. Across the city, and again, especially in Pudsey and Farsley, we've got the litter free groups going. They pick up an enormous amount of waste for us. So why are we still struggling with that element? Ginnel cutting. How many times are we asking for ginnels to be cut back? You know, we've got residents trying to use these ginnels to walk rather than use a car, in line with the climate emergency, in line with our instructions, you know, that people have more time on the hand. They are walking rather than getting in the car and driving, which is absolutely great. But they're finding that the ginnels are so overgrown that they're not using them. So we are actually forcing them back into the vehicles again. My final point was fly tipping, which hasn't been mentioned yet. You know, we know that the charges at the tips are causing fly tipping. We absolutely know that. Yet, you know, we wake up every morning to reports of fly tipping. You know, we're driving around the ward and we stop and we're photographing and reporting fly tipping. Great, they're being picked up, but it's another stretch on an overstretched system. You know, your service is at its max, and you guys are doing, you know, a great job in so many ways. We're there to help you as much as we can possibly help you, but you need to help yourself and you need to help us to help you. So, you know, if you've got a crew stood down, as we had recently, I said, if you'd let us know, we could have put that on social media, got the message out there for you. We wouldn't be battered with emails and social media messages. You aren't then battered with messages and reports. You know, let's work smarter, not harder. You know, and I think that's really my point, is we need to be working, you know, in a much more joined up way right across, and we need to, you know, work together as a big team, not just a team of you and a team of us, but let's do it together, guys.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Before I ask officers to come in, I'll just want to throw in my 2 pennies from Carvley and Farsley. I know it's been difficult. It's been difficult for everybody, and I know that you've got difficulty with holidays coming up. But as far as the bins are concerned, we're having this conversation before lockdown. So it isn't just a lockdown problem. Lockdown has compounded it. I do accept that. But it has been a problem that has been going on for a long time. Carvley and Farsley has been one of the highest of missed bins. And missed streets not being reported. I'm really struggling to get my head around this, because, okay, I accept if the wagon isn't up to scratch with technology. Why is it not possible to write it down and then get back to the yard and to then convey it in the normal way that we would have done years ago? Ginnels and rights of way. Trish, you're absolutely right about that, because, you know, we're talking about cycle lanes, which are great, but what about people who can't use cycles, people who want to walk with the children? We go to other parts of Leeds and actually they're all very clear. They look great, but in our part of the West Leeds, you know, it seems to be absolutely hopeless. You have to fight your way through. Fly tipping is absolutely horrendous in my ward, and I have to say we have got an excellent officer. Joanna Taylor has been, as soon as you ring her, she's on it straight away. But she shouldn't have to do. You know, if they didn't have to charge to go to the tip, we wouldn't have all these problems. And finally, I just want to come to street cleansing, because before lockdown, street cleansing certainly in Carvley and Farsley was excellent. So we know you have the capability, and I know that you've had a lot of issues throughout COVID with sickness and with people having to stand down because of the COVID test. So I'm hoping that you are going to get back to normal. In terms of the high presentations, this is going to continue. People are going to start to work from home a lot more. So it's something that you're going to have to address and have to work with. We don't want to get it in the neck. We don't want to give it to you in the neck. We just want things to work. We want proper solutions. And it may be that you have to do something radical. I don't know. But things have got to change, because we can't sustain this level of complaints. It's just not acceptable. And the public are going absolutely spare about it, and rightly so, especially in this hot weather. So could I ask Mr. Woolmer to come in first, please? And then if somebody would like to come in from cleansing, probably Jason. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try to work through the number of issues that were raised as quickly as I can, but obviously I'll try and give as detailed answers as you need as well. So working from the start, Councillor Blackburn raised an additional issue specifically around Highfields and the Ellen Road factor, particularly on Saturdays, although, as we know, games get moved all throughout the week nowadays. You could be playing any day of the week, but certainly in terms of daytime kick-off, Saturdays are going to be the issue that affects the most. Yes, we will do what we can in terms of looking at the routes there on Saturdays and if they can be changed, but I think there's specific discussion to be had around that. It's unlikely that we're going to be able to change routes ahead of the route review. I can happily sit down again. I'll get Matt to sit down with the Councillor Blackburn, both Blackburns really, because I think there's an issue raised by both, and go through what's possible, not possible. But it is a hugely complex issue. You can't just move a set of streets from one day to another. Obviously, you then got to choose another set of streets to move and swap it with. But if that's possible on a very local level as a sticking plaster solution ahead of a route review, we would do that in consultation with the crews. So if there is, like I say, a nearby route that's not as affected by Saturday parking, where we can swap the collection days and then write to those residents to say their collection day has changed, then we would do that. So I'm happy to have those specific discussions through Matt or another manager around that. Councillor Anne Blackburn raised quite understandable and rightly the issues she raised at scrutiny around assisted collections and the fact that they are suffering more than anyone really around when we're missing streets and missing those collections. and the vulnerability of those, the nature of the vulnerability of those that are on assisted collections, generally speaking, is obviously of a huge concern to us, which I acknowledge that scrutiny. Again, without going through all the reasons why that's happening more than normal, again, for obvious reasons, but that's the one thing that we really need to really step up again on and try and reduce even further. I recognise the fact that there are more fails on assisted collections than we should be at the moment. It is something that we have been doing things around training of staff and picking it up with staff in terms of their potential discussions and notes on their files around issues around assisted collections. And it's something that I've highlighted a number of times in my communications with staff around the importance of that and the consequence of not doing assisted collections. So that's something we are working and continue to work on, recognise the impact that has on people. I think the point that I'd just say that's kind of one of a couple of things she's raised. Yes, you said how frustrated you are, and a number of councils have. But just to repeat that, so are we. You know, it's not something we want to do. We want to try and sort things out as best we can. But we're still, you know, working under extraordinary pressure at the moment just to get a service out. Councillor Seary, a number of issues here, some of which we've had discussions around outside the meeting, but I'll leave the litter bins one for Jason. The TRO, yeah, I agree with that in terms of the inflexibility of the current TRO, experimental TRO that's in place, seemingly unflexible to look at specific days being in the TRO. That's something I'll discuss with Highways. The only flip side of that, I suppose, is that we need it to have some degree of flexibility because we may be changing collection days at the end of the route review. But I would have thought there'd be a way around that in terms of then varying the specific TRO in that location. So I will take that up, Councillor Seary. I think that's a fair issue and something that we're a little bit frustrated around. It might be there's just something specific about the legislation they're using for those TROs that means they can't do it. It seems strange to me if that was the case, but I'll certainly take that as an action away from the meeting and come back on that. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the point was made around it's our job to do the comms messages. Obviously, Councillor Smith had a different view around that in terms of their plea to work better, more joined up as a big team. So there's always going to be different views, I think, across members on that one about things. That our view is that we're not trying to pass on our fails and communication responsibilities to yourselves. By all means, you know, I can understand where that causes you a problem and an issue. So, you know, that's fair enough. All we're saying is, can we work together? Best the offer's there. If we can give you information, can you explain as best you can to customers? And really, the point I was trying to make previously was that I think there's a growing feeling in the community in general. This isn't just about our service, it's about everything that's happening, that we're somehow out of a crisis and we're out of a pandemic and there's no such thing as a third wave and things are back to normal. And I suppose what I was trying to do was say, can we all work together in giving that message to people that things are very difficult still, and please continue to bear with things. And but yeah, okay. Comms, yeah, so comms remissed things and delays, so that comes into that again. The point being made that Councillor Seary has raised elsewhere that there's a delay in terms of members' inbox and the information therefore coming back to you, which takes you beyond the 48 hours and causes you issues and embarrassment sometimes in terms of the comms that you give to members of the public. I recognise that, and I recognise that's something we need to try and improve on. We've got work going on at the moment on that. That needs some extra resource in that team. But again, that team has worked for 15 months now under extraordinary pressure and having to prioritise things each day that are almost impossible to prioritise. But I do agree that that's something that we need to improve on and try and reprioritise the members' inbox queries where particularly it's reporting missed streets. So that's certainly an action that I'll take away from this meeting. That's something we're already looking at. Councillor Smith, yeah, obviously recognising we've discussed around the missed bin report not being accurate and the reasons for those, and renewed effort around that. Overhanging trees, what does that mean? Well, what should happen is the system creates an automatic email to Clean Neighbours team to look at the reasons for the overhanging tree and whether it's an enforcement issue for the property it's coming from, or whether it's something that Parks then will deal with the forestry team. It's a meeting in itself, almost, overhanging trees. There are a number of permutations that then could happen from that report. If it is a private property, then it needs investigating. It may need some enforcement solution. You can't just go in and chop the tree down or demand that they chop it down within that day. So it may take some time for the legislation then to kick in and conversations to happen with that landowner. So it won't disappear the next week. So it could be an issue for a number of weeks. Similarly, even if it is our tree, our responsibility in terms of the council, again, there may be reasons that the forestry, not just in terms of resources, but in terms of whether there's a particular season and a requirement for the bird's nest, etc. They can't just go in and chop things down. So yeah, that can cause problems. But I think the assurance you wanted was that it's not just appearing on a report and nothing's been happening. I can assure you that does happen. Assisted collections was raised again by Councillor Smith. Point being made, well, that's fine. What happens after 4 reminders? Well, what we of course would hope is after 4 reminders, that's enough to remind the crew that that's an issue that they need to prioritise on the route, and largely that's enough usually to change some behaviours and make sure that they remember themselves. But I understand that sometimes that's not the case. Side waste. I probably need to look at that in terms of I think that's something we could communicate better with the public around side waste. So particularly green bins, you're okay putting side waste out for green bins as long as it's we'd prefer it to be in a clear bag or a green bag. But yeah, you can put side waste out for green bins. So yeah, it's perhaps something we need to communicate better on. Fly tipping, mentioned by Councillor Carter. I don't think I can get into a debate around charging too much here. That's obviously a polarised view on that. And the only point I'd make around that is that just to remember that the charging at tips is only the inert waste. So I'm not saying there is therefore no problem around some inert waste being part of fly tips. Of course, some inert waste is in fly tips, but the fly tips that the majority of fly tips that we see and have to deal with, you know, are more house clearances, fridges, furniture, beds, all sorts of things, kitchen clearances, and are not the items that we charge for. So just to put that other side of things, really, that yes, there are charges at tips, but only for the very small amount of waste that we receive at household waste sites. Councillor Carter, yeah, obviously, as we recognise ourselves, the issues were here before lockdown, and particularly we're hitting community committee areas such as yours more than other areas. We recognise that mainly through the routes becoming too big, really, in terms of the number of bins and the heavy presentation. It's already an issue, largely due to the number of new builds and developments, but also some behavioural changes of residents producing more waste. So yes, we recognise that your area was already a problem in terms of, and that was one of the reasons for the route review. What we've done to try and mitigate that as much as we can during the pandemic, certainly, is this whole issue of backups and scrap screws. So each day we've put in the budget in terms of our forecasting and what we're trying to do, and we aim to do each day without backing up, crewing up. We aim to get 10 backups across the city every day. We've very rarely managed to achieve that. We usually, when we're not in a particularly a wave that's affecting the COVID wave, we're usually getting about 6 to 8 backup crews out each day across the city, usually 2, 3, 4 in the Henshaw area, which serves your community committee. And the order of priority then of when we have those backup crews available is obviously the first priority is to clear any backlog, any missed streets that we know about or you're telling us around. So that will be the priority in terms of black, green and brown. And then once we've got that sorted and tasked for the day, what backup resources we have available are then prioritised towards those heavy presentation routes such as your area. So a lot of the backups, when we do get them, are prioritised in the outer west area from Henshaw. So we have done something in terms of trying to get extra resources out to deal with that heavy presentation in COVID. That of course relies on us being able to crew up those number of backups each day. At the moment we're struggling with that. We're back to quite a lot of staff, like I say, being off with COVID itself or self-isolating. I think that just finally, the point that I think has been made, and certainly I would understand you asking, is so what are you doing about it? You know, you've known for 15 months, you know there's going to be a problem continuing for the future. Without rewriting the history of the last 15 months, I think everybody across the country is not really known where we were going at different points. I've had pressure and comments going back to autumn last year of why we were opening stuff out and doing away with certain things, etc. And here we are in June, July, at the start, I think, of a significant third wave with a lot of restrictions, I think, stay in place for quite a bit longer. There are those restrictions that really affect us, particularly around self-isolation of crews and bubbles. They're the biggest things. So what we have done in the last 15 months is, like I say, crew up as many backups as we possibly can, spending a lot of resource on that. We'll be considerably overspent the first quarter that we reported for this year as a service, because we're spending as much as we can on getting backups out. That went primarily through overtime for crews, but also we've been looking at additional agency staff where we can. Well, that's not always so easy. The market is pretty swamped, and you can't just pick an agency and say, well, 5 more people tomorrow. They've got to be sourced and then trained. But we have been increasing agency when we need to at the peaks. We've also employed more people, so we've increased the pool of staff that aren't allocated to particular routes, so that we've got actual increase in salaried posts. So we've done those 3 things that we can. Longer term, I agree, Councillor Carter, it's very difficult to predict where we will be in terms of what should we be factoring when we do the route review. Should we be factoring in an extra 5-10% of tonnage, certainly for black bins, over the next few years, as perhaps home working continues and the effect around that? That's something we're looking at, and obviously it'll be a national issue, and we'd hope and expect some national sort of discussion and advice around that as well. But yeah, absolutely, that's something that we need to look at and decide what we're going to do for the future. But what we'll continue to do, whilst certainly COVID is affecting us, we'll continue to crew up as many backups as we can to meet the challenges, particularly in areas like yours that are more disproportionately affected because of the heavy presentation issues you already had. I think I'll finish there. I think that's covered most of the refuse related issues, I hope. Obviously tell me if not. Jason, can I pass over to you for the litter bin and the other clean labels related issues?
Before I let you go, John, there's just a couple of things, and also I've got a number of people putting their hand up that may want to ask you more questions. Yeah. So just hang on a second. One is the first one is the missed streets not reported and writing it down, and the second one is consultations, TROs. Presumably, highways will be writing to all the residents that are affected. Because if not, if they just stick it on the lamppost, it'll just cause another wave of problems for us when they find out they can't park there. And secondly, following the review of the bin routes, are there any more new developments that need to be added to that? And then I'll bring in the others. So I've got, before you answer those, John, sorry, I've got Trish, Anne Blackburn and Simon Seary. So Trish.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, John. I just want to come back on a couple of points, if I may. So the communication piece, I absolutely agree with Simon Seary that it isn't our job to communicate for you. However, when you have an emergency situation, like you need to stand down a crew, then that's when you could tell us faster and we can help you and work together. So apologies if that wasn't clear. The second thing, I'd like to come back to you on the trees. You're saying, obviously we can't get them cut down overnight. It may be a process, and we've got to go through who the tree belongs to, how we can resolve it. Equally, they don't grow overnight. So, surely, that's a double-edged sword. So, your crews can't just immediately say, we can't get up that street because of the tree. Surely they've been getting up and down the street perfectly adequately prior to that. So I think that, that's a little bit different. The assisted collection point, yes, remind them for the first 4 sets of collections, but why not continue to remind them? You're saying that you would hope that behaviours would change. Why not just cut the middleman out and just do it? That way we know that they've had the reminder, and we stand a much, much better chance of that assisted collection being carried out. And I don't know if you saw what I put in the chat, but I believe the whole process around onboarding of new developments, be it new streets or entire new developments, needs looking at. The pain that we're currently going through at the moment with a street in Tysel, and it's so frustrating. We've had an absolute nightmare with that street, and I'm sure that's replicated many, many times over across the city. So I think we need to be a lot better with the onboarding of new streets and new developments. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anne Blackburn.
Yes, thank you, Chair. One for John and one for Jason. For John, I'd say, yes, I know the route review has been on the cards for quite a while now, and obviously with COVID, it's been delayed. But I think, and I'm assuming, that you will take into account the fact that if people are working from home, and we don't know how many people in the city are going to continue working from home, I mean, obviously we don't know that, if the matter of if the matter of the extra 15% waste that's being generated, if that's going to continue or not. Clearly it's causing a problem, and from what I can piece together, and tell me if I'm wrong here, is that when crews are going out to collect, I know I was told ages ago where the vehicles cut out after they've got to a maximum of what they're supposed to take weight-wise, and so then they have to go and be emptied. So I'm assuming that I've seen it happen where they've only done part of a route, and then vehicles disappeared. So I assume that's why. And I accept that could happen now and again before COVID. But surely what I'm getting at is you're talking about doing a route review now, but I think that if you doing your route review now, you won't necessarily be taking that into consideration. And obviously you should. I appreciate, who knows what will happen in the future, but clearly this matter of the 15% over presentation is causing lots of problems now. So when you do a route review, I think that's got to be taken into consideration as well. Otherwise, you're going to have to go back and make further changes, and people don't like the changes to when they put the bins out, etc., and they get into a routine. So I think whenever this is done, it wants to take in all the facets of the problems. And not just the general ones. I think we've got to sort of look at that as well. The comment or question for Jason is actually to do with gully cleansing. Just to know how are we doing with that? Have we still got 5 vehicles on the road, or have we got any vehicles on the road? Because I know they tend to go around ward to ward unless councillors sort of complain or request the certain gullies wanting doing. But I just wanted to know, are they still doing it, or has it stopped, or what? Because now we're getting quite a few gullies that's smelling, and I will be reporting them. But I just wondered what the general situation was with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Then Forsyth.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of other bits. Obviously, half term 2 weeks ago, we experienced a lot of misbins, presumably holiday planning or increased sickness because they couldn't get the time off. You know, I'm in that business, so I'm aware that, you know, holiday planning is key to get it right. Where are we going to be for the 6 weeks holiday? Yeah, do we have enough people in there? Another one as well, actually, sorry to pop this in, is if a neighbouring property puts their bin out, yeah, together, we're getting reports where they're only emptying one bin because the bin service believe that that property's got 2 bins, but the residents are trying to help them by putting the 2 bins together. We've had quite a few of experience of this. Obviously, you've changed, or not you changed your policy, you forced your policy or reinforced your policy earlier on in the year, but again, no communication. You know, we've had to pass that communication on. And thank you, Councillor Smith, for reiterating what we're saying. You know, we want to support communication about, you know, ad hoc issues, yeah, that we can communicate. But the whole message about you struggling with people, with the demand and the service itself is a day-to-day operation that you should be communicating daily. All right. And I'll wait for Jason's response on the litter bins. Let's hope the design's the same as, yeah, what we've got. Thank you.
So Forsyth.
Oh, thank you. I'll be fairly short, really. And I appreciate that we're talking about is the service and everything. So I'm sort of talking outside the box here. But and thank you as well, because obviously it's been very challenging for the service and everything else during the COVID, and also for families as well. However, 2 years ago, the Leeds by example, they found out that 50% of households wanted to reduce the amount of waste they produced. Now, I'm wondering what's happened to any sort of communication or any sort of campaigning around that, because it would seem to me, you know, an issue here is the amount of waste that's being produced. And I know it's changed, obviously, since COVID, because there must be a huge amount of cardboard, for example. I know there's a world shortage as well. So I just wonder where that is all going to tie into all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, John. If you could answer those, then we'll go on to Jason. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, pick up on the outstanding couple of points, Councillor Carter, from your questions. Yes, sorry for not covering those. The missed bins, why can't staff just write it down if they've not got the in-cab? Absolutely, they should be doing. So if they haven't got an in-cab working, that's exactly what they should be doing. So what I'm trying to do is highlight the fact that that's not always happening. It's more the case where we've got crews that are coming in, picking jobs up halfway through a day, and the liaison between 2 crews working a route in your area. So, as I say, in your area, we hopefully, with the resource available, we put extra backups into your area to support the existing crews, because we know they're going to have every presentation. And sometimes the liaison between those 2 crews about which streets have been done, which streets not been done, isn't always as good as it could be. I don't want to particularly blame the crews for that, because, as I say, they're working under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, and often where we're having to work together, it's because something's happened that day as well. So crew members become symptomatic, or the worst case, they've actually been tested positive, or their family members become symptomatic. So we're suddenly standing a crew down halfway or part of the way through a day, and then another crew's having to come in and pick up where they left off. So there will always be, and I'm just trying to be as honest as possible about this, there will be problems over the coming few weeks and months probably. But my commitment and what you're asking for, the minimum, is that we at least try and improve more on what we can and reduce the amount of times those things happen. So I recognise that, and yes, crews should be writing down where they've missed streets if their in-cab technology either isn't working or they don't have it on their wagon. So that's not the reason the things are happening, because they should be doing that. So I need to be honest and clear about that. The new builds, and then I think Councillor Anne Blackburn touched on this as well, the new builds in terms of where we are now in the route review and weights and etc. So how it works at the moment is, and the reason we've got to where we got to pre-pandemic and we wanted the route review in place, one of the big issues of that, of course, was the fact the number of new builds has been since the last time the routes were designed almost 10 years ago. So we already had a problem, particularly affected areas like yours. So in effect, basically, the routes have become too big to manage in a day. So we have what's called a new builds crew for the city. Pre-pandemic, that we allocate all those different new developments through the city, and they specifically do new builds where the existing crew can't have it added to their route. We've put an extra one of those crews on during the pandemic, so we now have 2 new builds route crews, specific crews for the city, and that's to recognise the fact, obviously, the delay in the route review itself to solve that problem longer term. So when we do the review, in the way we did it with the garden waste, what will happen is we'll sit down and we'll look at what we know in terms, we'll speak to planning. Planning will give us the planned developments over the next few years that are likely to come forward, and we build them into the new routes as we did with the garden routes. So you'll get maps, and we'll consult with members at the time, and you'll see the maps in your wards that will show a shaded area where we know, or we're quite sure the development will be. You may have some issues about that, of course, but we'll build them in so that when the houses eventually are built, the crews know it was already built into their route for that day. There will always be issues of further developments, and of course that we don't know about to get put forward. And that's the point I've made a number of times in the scrutiny. One of the things that we need to do better is to not just wait for another route review. We need to plan that so we know when the next one would happen, because we know in 4 or 5 years' time that there'll be more developments coming that we haven't built into the routes. So we'll know in 4 or 5 years' time we need to do another route review. It's just something that needs to be inbuilt into what we do, so it just doesn't happen by accident. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance around the new builds. But that does give us problems now. So Councillor Smith raising the point, the very specific one that I've been involved in recently around the new, relatively small new build, a cul-de-sac of street of houses, where a number of those houses have started to be occupied, not all of them. That's sometimes when it gives us problems, and partial developments start to be opened by developers ahead of the whole development being opened. And yeah, there's been specific issues around that route, and that route being picked up, as I say, by the new builds team, and that them realising that that's to be collected. What that sometimes gives us, and this was an example of that, is that you may find that a very relatively small new build, almost hesitate to use the word estate, a couple, 2 or 3 streets, may end up, and is likely to end up with different collection day than the streets around it, because it's being covered by a different crew, a new builds crew, and that doesn't help with the confusion of residents around which is their collection day. So I think there's 2 or 3 things there factored into the issue that Councillor Smith raised. Councillor Smith also raised, made the point which I take, and Councillor Seary said as well, our communication isn't clear what was meant by that. So apologies if I misinterpreted that. I'd probably make the comment that I think COVID itself is an emergency, and that itself as the greater thing is what we need to communicate together on still. But I take the point that that's for us to do citywide for residents. The trees issue about them don't growing overnight, of course, yeah, I completely understand that. And again, that's what we expect crews to do. So sometimes they may press that button because that's what they should do when you see the overhanging trees. It doesn't necessarily mean they've missed the route. It may mean they've still done the route, but they're raising exactly that point you made, Councillor Smith, that they can see there's going to be a problem if it's not tackled soon. So yes, crews know to do that, and sometimes those overhanging tree reports are exactly that. Yes, I take the point about assisted collections. Why I dropped that off after 4 weeks. I'll consider that, and that's something I might look at in terms of suspending that that instruction, if you like, to remove them after 4 weeks. And you're perhaps right that maybe for now, while it's still a particular problem, it should stay on almost permanently on their task sheets. So I think that's a fair point. Councillor Blackburn, I think I've answered the issue around the route review in terms of new builds. You make the point, and I think I did comment on this earlier, to be fair, around the fact the extra waste, and we don't know how long that's going to continue with people working from home. I think Councillor Carter raised that. So yes, that is an issue we're going to have to look at when we do the route review, make a decision on what is the extra waste we're going to factor into routes in the future. I don't know yet. Is the answer to that. We'll obviously analyse and look at the data when we come round to doing the route designs. If it was done now, I would probably be saying we'd probably need to factor in somewhere between 5 and 10% extra black bin waste as an average across the city into the new routes, so that they've got that capacity. If it ends up reducing and being less than that in time, then at least that gives us capacity in those routes to perhaps absorb some new bills in the future. So that would be the kind of figure. If I was pushed now, I'd be saying we probably need to factor in. But of course, that therefore means more routes and more cost, and a cost to the council in doing that. But that I would suggest that's the kind of ballpark we're in at the moment. I would have thought and would need to do. I think that covers Councillor Blackburn's, which made the point about routes finishing towards the end of the day. Yeah, exactly that. What you surmised would be the case, that if they've done finished the day in terms of the presentation that they can do and clear, then they should be reporting the remainder of that route as missed, whichever presentation, and that should be being picked up within the next 2 days if we can get a backup resource out. Councillor Seary, half-term holiday planning, absolutely. We have when operational staff book or request leave, it's we have a system that's done through, it's computerised, and we can set and adjust the amount of leave that we can allow at any given moment. So it's not automatic, and we haven't adjusted that the wrong way in terms of allowing more people to go off on leave, although that will be a problem with all the leave that's been accumulated. And one of the reasons we're looking to get some more staff temporarily into the service over the next few months, so we can up that limit of how many people we can then allow some leave for over summer and towards the end of this year. So yeah, we do that. So it won't have been a case that too many people took time for half term because it wasn't under control. The issue at half term was more about we had a little bit of a perfect storm for a week of, if you remember that bank, which was great in a lot of ways. We suddenly got the really nice weather suddenly hit us that week. Garden waste again shot up, whereas it looked much less than normal in May, early May. And then that was when we started also to begin to get some of the issues again around self-isolation, some crew bubbles bursting, rising again a little bit was around that time. So there's a bit of a combination of things happened that week, and less people were volunteering for overtime than normal. And everything's right at the margins of things like that. You only need, if we're relying on, say, getting another 2 or 3 backups out, that's 3 backups is 9 people out of a service of 350, 400 operation staff. You only need half a dozen 9 people that's only a couple of bubbles to burst, 4 or 5 people to phone in saying they're symptomatic, or the daughter or the mother has been symptomatic, they can't be in work, or 3 or 4 more people than would normally volunteer for overtime decide not to. So we're really at the margins more than ever now and that affects us therefore, and half term did really hit us. Yes, I understand the point you're making, Councillor, about perhaps some overzealousness around implementation of the 2 brown bin rule in terms of being sure that it's from the same property, and that is something that we've picked up on. I don't think there's too many of those. I know there's 1 or 2 you've picked up on, but we've reissued instructions to staff around that. You know, if you're in doubt, you leave. You don't do anything. You know, the benefit of doubt, if you like, goes to the customer, the resident. So they should only really be removing, should be removing any brown bins, but they certainly shouldn't be not emptying more than 1 bin unless they're absolutely sure it's from the same property. So I'll check up on that to make sure that's still happening. That is happening now. Okay, I think that's the main thing that the issue. Councillor Series was making the issue again about comms, and that perhaps could be better. Councillor South, the final point I think was around green bins and around again restarting, if you like, or reigniting the campaign to try and get a shift from black bins to green bins in particular. It's something we've done quite a lot of throughout the pandemic, certainly in the first few months of it, with Zero Waste Leeds in particular, doing a lot of work through our Leeds Recycle site, and we put a lot of information on the comms with members around that, links to particular websites and social media friendly information that could be shared. I agree. I think that's something we need to look again at and have a further push on now to around greens. I'm of the view that we probably need to get a little bit back to basics around that. I think we've overcomplicated that message in the past, and I think, as you rightly said, you know, more Amazon packaging, cardboard. I think we just need to sort of concentrate on what you can put in, the 3 or 4 basics of what you can put in, rather than overcomplicating various plastic types and various things if they don't stretch and all that sort of stuff. If we can just get the message across to people, put your cans and tins in, put your main plastics in, your pots, your tubs, and put your cardboard and paper in, that would make a massive difference, I think, in terms of the more going in the green bin. We're also looking as well at what we can do with green bins to look to see if we can have a push at allowing more people to have 2 green bins, you know, without having to have more than 4 in the household. And we need to be careful about that and the cons around that, make sure we can resource that. But promising something we can't do. But again, that's something we are looking at the moment around being more upfront about people being able to have 2 green bins, irrespective of how many people we've got in the household, to encourage people to recycle more and shift waste from the black bins. But we're just thinking about logistically and also making sure we can deliver that first. That is something we are looking at. I think that covers all the things, Chair, from the refuse perspective. Obviously, if it doesn't, you let me know. I'll stop there.
Thank you, John. Just very quickly emphasise.
Yes, thank you. A little surprised at the response, really, because I do understand about previously the idea is try to get people to recycle more, but actually the message should be to reduce first, to reduce the amount of waste. It's not just okay to just transfer over to recycling. So it is the messaging around that I think is quite important, but that's outside our this meeting. It does go reduce, reuse, repurpose before you ever get to recycle. Okay, right.
Thank you, Anne. We've also got I think it's the next meeting we've got coming up. We've also got the recycling greener people coming to talk to us, and I guess, you know, some of us have got some very difficult questions for those people about what they're doing. For example, cars burning with their engines on outside school, etc. So I ask all members to save your questions for them, and I'm sure you'll have lots of them. Thank you very much, Mr. Woolmer. Could I ask Jason to come in now and finish off? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to Councillor Series' initial 6 questions. The first one was about the contractor for the bins. As I mentioned, we're in the process of procuring a new contract for litter bin supplies. It is a big contract, as you can imagine, for a city the size of Leeds. And there's every chance that the supplier may be changing, and we will endeavour to get the new bins as close to the old ones as possible in terms of appearance. So obviously we'll see no reason why we shouldn't be able to get them looking and performing as the current ones do, but there may be a slight variation in appearance. We're having those discussions now. We're sampling the bins from the potential contractor now as we speak, so I'll be able to say more on that in a couple of weeks. In terms of the 20 bins, I just ask for your patience. We can't place a contract until we're absolutely sure that we're happy that the new bins are going to hold up to our requirements. If it's really, really pressing, I can do an emergency order. Other than that, please just bear with us whilst we're appointing a new contractor. In terms of the cleaning regime for stickers, Councillor Siri, the messaging is still the same. Take your rubbish home. If you can, use your bins at home. Don't use the street litter bins. But when we need to, we can. Where we need to, we can clean and re-sticker and do what's required. If you could just let me know what the ask is, or liaise with Chris, I'm sure we can facilitate that. Councillor Smith, thanks ever so much for those questions, and I agree it is about working smarter and working more effectively. I'm sorry that you feel street cleansing is poor quality at the moment. It's probably a fair reflection based on some of the things that you've outlined, but we do have a plan to get it back to more normal levels, with the caveat that both John and James have emphasised that we're not out of this yet, and staffing levels are still very variable, and there are still restrictions to how we can work. Things like numbers of people in a crew, social distancing, and obviously the need to prioritise certain types of service where staffing levels become really restricted. So we'll work with you on that and hopefully reassure you that we will improve things. Ginnel cutting. Let us know where the ginnels are. There's no reason why ginnels should be overgrown. If we've fallen behind due to staffing levels, then it's probably understandable. But most ginnels that members of the public use are the responsibility of the C&T teams to maintain. So we should be on it. This time of year is not the best time to cut back due to issues in relation to nesting and what have you. But just let us know once again, and we'll come up with a program to get on top of what we're lagging there. You mentioned fly tipping, and John's outlined the service's position on that. We'll continue to work with you in terms of fly tipping priorities and hotspots. I think Councillor Amanda Carter mentioned that Joanna Taylor's generally on it in terms of investigating fly tipping and staying on top of the issues, and we'll continue to work with you. Councillor Amanda Carter, you re-emphasise ginnels and public rights of way. Once again, let us know where you've got issues and problems, and we will ensure that we've got a programme in place. It may have slipped due to where we've been over the last few months. And thank you for acknowledging that we had a good standard of street cleansing actually pre-pandemic, and we aim to be back to that standard as soon as possible. We've got a plan in place for that. Councillor Anne Blackburn, on the supplementary questions, you raised the issue about gully cleansing. Gullies are still being cleansed. They are on a regular cycle. There is a programme in place. I'm not entirely sure of the details of the programme. The service is now managed by colleagues in highways. But once again, if you've got specifics, email me, and we'll get those issues resolved. I think that's it. Unless there's any further questions.
Thank you very much. I see nobody's hands up, so that's good. Thank you very much for those comprehensive answers to our questions. We don't want to be getting on to you, but our constituents are giving us a really difficult time over particularly bins, and we just want it to improve. So thank you very much, gentlemen. We haven't got very much more to discuss other than the date and time of the next meeting, which is actually already fixed, isn't it, Debbie?
It is indeed, and it is the 5th of July, and it will be in Civic Hall, room 6 and 7.
Thank you very much. It will be really good to see everybody face to face, and have a proper meeting where nobody's losing their Wi-Fi and where nobody's muted and everybody can say what they want. Well, thank you very much to members, and thank you very much to council officers, and hope to see you at the next meeting. Thank you.